Darius Wynn was 41 years old the evening his wife handed him an envelope across the dinner table, with the particular care of someone delivering something they have rehearsed delivering, and inside was a printed invitation to a gathering she had organized at the Hendricks Estate Ballroom in Charlotte. 200 guests, a Saturday night in late April. Billed on the card as a celebration of new beginnings. He had read it twice before he understood what it was. She had spent the last 8 months in quiet, careful preparation, and this was the final piece. A public event designed not merely to announce the end of their marriage, but to ratify, in front of every colleague and family member and social contact they had ever shared, that she was moving forward and that he was being left behind. Her new partner would be there. Her attorney would be there. The framed narrative, already distributed through mutual friends in the preceding weeks, was that Darius had not been enough, that he had coasted, that she had carried the marriage, that the man she had chosen now was everything Darius was not. She had no idea that the catering company serving that event was a subsidiary of a hospitality group Darius had owned quietly for 6 years. She had no idea that the building itself, the Hendricks Estate, was managed by a property group whose primary investor had been Darius since the year before they were married. She had no idea what was going to land on that rooftop at 8:47 on a Saturday evening in April, in front of 200 people she had assembled to watch him disappear. 200 people saw something entirely different. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The afternoon light fell across the workshop in long diagonals that Darius had always found satisfying. The kind of light that showed the grain in the wood, that made the small imperfections visible and the careful work beautiful. He was refinishing a credenza he had built 3 years prior from reclaimed white oak, running a block plane along the front rail in the unhurried way of a man who understood that the work had its own pace and that forcing it produced nothing worth keeping. The workshop was attached to the back of the house in the Dilworth neighborhood of Charlotte, a neighborhood he had chosen for its bones, for the original craftsman architecture and the established trees and the particular quality of quiet it maintained, even as the city grew louder around it. He had renovated the house himself over 2 years before they moved in. Every board was his, every cabinet, every threshold, every foot of hardwood floor that ran from the entryway to the back hall. He had done the rough work on weekends and the finish work in the evenings, and he had not talked about it much, because talking about work in progress had always struck him as a way of spending the energy that the work itself required. His father, Earl Wynn, had been an aviation mechanic in the Air Force for 22 years, and had raised Darius in a house where precision was a form of respect. Earl had told him once, when Darius was 14 and had rushed a wiring repair and done it wrong, son, "Speed is what you show people. Accuracy is what you keep for yourself." He had died of a stroke at 63, the year before Darius met Claudette, and there was not a day of significant decision-making in Darius's life since then that he did not hear that voice somewhere beneath his own thinking. He met Claudette Mercer at a Chamber of Commerce dinner 9 years ago, in the ballroom of a hotel he had attended as a silent representative of one of his investment interests, which was the way he attended most public events, presenting as a logistics consultant with a modest professional profile and a carefully unimpressive wardrobe. She was there with her marketing firm, vibrant and certain and fluent in the language of rooms like that one, and she had sat beside him at a round table for 8 and found him, he could tell, pleasantly unchallenging in a way that she interpreted as safety. He had liked her certainty. He had liked the way she committed to things she believed in. He had not anticipated that he would eventually become one of the things she committed to dismantling. The shift had been slow and then sudden, the way structural failures often were, A long period of load accumulation that looked like stability right up until the moment it did not. The comments began in year 4. About his truck. About his office, which was modest and off a side street, and looked like exactly what he had chosen it to look like. About the speed of their life relative to the lives of her colleagues, who vacationed in a certain way and drove certain things, and spoke about money with a casualness that Claudette had begun to admire, and then to desire, and then to require. He had said very little. He had noted everything. She was in the kitchen when he came in from the workshop that evening, her back to him, on a call she did not end when he entered. The new perfume was the same one she had been wearing for 2 months, the one he had not seen in the bathroom cabinet and had not asked about. Her phone was face down on the counter in the particular way that had become habitual in the preceding season. She turned, mouthed a greeting, turned back to the call. He poured water, went to his study, and closed the door. On his desk was his secondary phone, the one registered to the holding company, the one his financial manager and his attorneys and his property partners called. He picked it up and read a message from his building manager at the Hendricks estate, confirming that the reservation for the celebration of new beginnings had been finalized and that the event was fully booked for April 22nd. He set the phone down. He already knew what the event was. He had known for 3 weeks. The discovery had not arrived the way he might have imagined it, years before, when he was a younger man who still thought about how betrayal arrived. It had not been a confrontation or a dramatic revelation. It had been an overheard conversation. A call that Claudette had taken in the backyard on a Tuesday evening in February, believing the workshop door was closed and the distance sufficient. He had been inside, working, and the window was cracked for ventilation, and her voice had carried the way voices do in the still air of a February evening in Charlotte when there is nothing to absorb the sound. He had heard a name. He had heard a date. He had heard the phrase the night of the party, and he will not see it coming, and he will have nothing left to stand on. He had continued working for another 20 minutes after the call ended. He had planed 3 more passes on the credenza rail. He had cleaned the blade and hung it on its hook. He had done these things with his full attention, because that was the discipline his father had given him, the understanding that you did not allow external events to corrupt the quality of what your hands were doing. Then he had gone inside and waited until Claudette was asleep and opened his laptop. His face remained perfectly calm. She had been in contact with a man named Preston Hale, a commercial real estate developer she had met at a conference 11 months prior, in a way that the phone records, which his attorney would later obtain through proper legal channels, made entirely unambiguous. 11 months of contact. The messages, which his attorney reviewed, established that Claudette had represented her marriage as effectively over for the duration of that period, that she had been consulting with a divorce attorney since month 8, and that the celebration of new beginnings had been Preston's suggestion, a public event designed to establish a new social reality before Darius had the opportunity to establish one of his own. She had been planning it for 11 months. He sat with that for a long time. The house was quiet around him in the particular way that houses are quiet when the person sleeping in the next room has become a stranger you have not yet named as one. The coffee he had made grew cold beside him on the desk. He thought about speed and accuracy and the difference between the two, his father's formulation, applied now to a situation Earl Wynn had never imagined for his son, and would have addressed with the same unhurried precision he applied to everything else. Speed was what you showed people. Accuracy was what you kept for yourself. He had been accurate for 9 years. He noted 2 more items before he closed the laptop. The first was a financial transfer. $18,400 moved from their joint investment account in 3 installments over 4 months. each transferred to an account he could not immediately identify, but that subsequent research would confirm belonged to Claudette's personal savings, held at a separate institution. The second was a calendar entry on her shared work calendar, visible through the household account, dated 6 weeks from now. Final walkthrough, Hendricks Estate. That entry had been made 7 months ago. She had booked the venue before she had told him anything was wrong. He closed the laptop. He sat for another moment in the kitchen's stillness. Then he picked up the secondary phone and made a single call. His attorney answered on the second ring. "It's time," Darius said. "I'll have the full package ready by Friday," the attorney said. "Good," he paused. "One more thing. April 22nd. I need to make a reservation." He met with Claudette Osai, his attorney, no relation to his wife by name alone, on a Thursday morning in her office on South Tryon Street. She was 54 years old, precise and unhurried, and she had represented Darius's personal interests for 7 years, which meant she knew the full scope of what Claudette Mercer Wynne had married and had apparently never investigated. Claudette Osai spread the assets summary on the conference table without preamble. It covered 12 pages. Darius had built his holdings the way his father had taught him to do careful work, methodically, without announcement, over a period of years that had preceded his marriage by a decade, and had continued through it without his wife's awareness, because she had never asked, and he had never seen a reason to volunteer what was not yet her business to know. The holding company, the hospitality subsidiaries, the partial ownership of 4 commercial properties in the Charlotte metro area, including the Hendricks Estate, the investment portfolio, the Aviation LLC, which had started as a private arrangement for business travel and had expanded, in the prior 2 years, into something his accountant now described as a meaningful asset. She has no idea what the marital estate actually contains, Claudette Osai said, without inflection. "No," Darius said. "Her attorney has filed based on disclosed assets only. They haven't looked past the logistics consulting income and the joint accounts." She tapped the summary. "The prenuptial agreement you signed in year 1, which she has apparently either forgotten or assumed was unenforceable, is, in fact, fully enforceable and covers all pre-marital assets and their derivative growth." "I know." She looked at him over the top of her reading glasses. "You were patient." "My father called it accuracy," he said. She nodded and set down her pen and folded her hands on the summary. "Her attorney has made an additional error," she said. "They have filed with a marital asset valuation that relies on your disclosed consulting income and the joint account balances. They have not submitted a formal discovery request for business holdings. That window is still open on their side, which means they will eventually look, but they have not yet." She tapped the prenuptial agreement on page 3. "By the time they do, this will already have been entered. The order of filing matters here." She picked the pen back up. "I will have the full response and asset disclosure ready for delivery on the afternoon of April 22nd. I assume you have a specific time in mind." 4 o'clock, he said. She looked at him. "Before the event. I want her to know before she addresses 200 people," he said. "Not as cruelty, as accuracy. She should know what story she is actually telling before she stands up to tell it." Claudette Osai considered him for a long moment, with the expression of someone who found this entirely consistent with everything she had come to understand about the man across the table. 4 o'clock, she said, and wrote it down. Preparation was the work. 2 days before the event, Darius drove to Gastonia to see his Aunt Vera, who was 71 and had been his father's youngest sister, and who had, in the absence of parents, become the keeper of the family's institutional memory. She lived in a brick house she had owned since 1984, with a garden she managed with an engineer's attention to soil and spacing. And she met Darius at the door as she always did, with the expression of someone who had been expecting him and had already put the coffee on. She listened to the full account without interruption. She had heard the early parts of it before, in pieces, over the preceding months. Now she heard the complete shape of it, and she was quiet for a while after he finished. She organized a party, Vera said. Finally. 200 people. Vera looked at her coffee cup. And you're going. I'm going. She was quiet again. Then, she looked up at him with the particular directness she reserved for things she considered non-negotiable. Your father used to say that the only people who organize public humiliations are people who have already decided they're safe. They never account for the possibility that they've miscounted. She set down her cup. Don't go there angry. Don't go there proud. Go there finished. There is a difference, and she will see it. And so will every person in that room. He drove back to Charlotte that evening thinking about finished, what it meant, and what it looked like, and how it differed from both victory and revenge. By the time he crossed the city limits, he understood that finished was not a feeling. It was a posture. It was the posture of a man who had already resolved every open question and was simply allowing the resolution to become visible. That Friday, his building manager called to confirm one additional arrangement at the Hendricks estate. The rooftop landing pad, installed 2 years ago for the charter aviation clients who occasionally used the venue for corporate events, had been cleared and certified for use on the evening of April 22nd. He thanked the manager and ended the call. Real power operated in quiet rooms and sometimes on rooftops. The evening of April 22nd was clear and cool, the kind of April night in Charlotte that arrived like a gift after a difficult winter. The air light, the sky deep blue at 8 o'clock, the city laid out below the Hendricks estate with its lights coming on in sequence as the dark gathered. 200 guests had arrived by 7:30. The ballroom was arranged with the precision of a professional event, round tables, floral centerpieces, a bar along the far wall, a small stage where Claudette would speak. Preston Hale was present, positioned in the room with the ease of a man who believed himself to be the conclusion of the story rather than a character in someone else's. Darius's attorney had delivered the formal divorce response and full asset disclosure to Claudette's attorney at 4 o'clock that afternoon. He had done so by design, so that Claudette Mercer Wynne would receive the news while she was dressing for her own event. He had thought carefully about this timing. He wanted her to know, before he arrived, that the story she had curated for 200 people was already no longer accurate. At 8:42, Claudette was at the podium. She had composed herself in the way of a woman who had decided that composure was the only available option and had committed to it fully. She was speaking about forward momentum. She was speaking about new chapters. The sound reached the room before anything was visible. A low rhythmic percussion from above, steady and growing. The kind of sound that redirected every conversation in the building without anyone deciding to stop talking. Heads turned toward the tall windows. Someone near the window said something that caused 3 other people to look. At 8:47, the helicopter settled onto the Hendricks estate rooftop with the settled authority of a machine that had done this before and would do it again, and found nothing remarkable about the act. The room had gone quiet in the particular way that 200 people go quiet when something has happened that no one had put on the program. Darius came through the ballroom doors at 8:52. He was wearing a dark suit he had owned for 4 years and a white shirt without a tie, and he walked through the room the way he always walked, unhurried, taking in information without broadcasting that he was doing so. He nodded to two people he knew from the Chamber of Commerce. He accepted a glass of water from a server. He found the table nearest to the stage and sat down. Claudette, at the podium, had seen him enter. The composure held, but only at the surface. Beneath it, he could see the recalculation happening. The rapid reassessment of the sequence of events and what his presence and the sound from the roof meant in combination. His attorney, Claudette Osei, entered through a side door 30 seconds later and took the chair beside him. Preston Hale had not moved from where he was standing near the bar, but he had stopped holding his drink in a casual way. Darius waited until Claudette stepped down from the podium. He waited until she crossed the room toward him, because he knew she would. She was not a woman who avoided confrontations she believed she was winning, and she did not yet understand that she was not winning this one. She stopped 3 feet from his table. The guests nearest to them had gone still. "You weren't supposed to be here," she said. Quietly, "You sent me an invitation," he said. She looked at him with the expression of someone who had planned a door and found a wall. "The helicopter is mine." He said it the same way he said everything, without emphasis, without theater. "Has been for 2 years. Along with the building you're standing in." He paused. "Your attorney received the full asset disclosure at 4 o'clock this afternoon. I wanted you to have the information before you addressed your guests." She was very still. "The prenuptial agreement covers the premarital holdings and their growth," he continued. "Your attorney will explain what that means for the division proceedings. I expect it will take some time to work through." He looked at her with the same even attention he brought to everything. "You built an event around a story, Claudette. I understand why. But the story had a gap in it. It had me in it, as I appeared to you, not as I was. Those were 2 different things for 9 years. He stood. He heard Preston Hale say something from across the room. He did not look toward him. "I organized a public event once," Darius said, quietly enough that only she and those immediately around them could hear. 15 years ago. A ribbon cutting on my first commercial property. I did not invite anyone who did not know the whole truth of what they were celebrating." He picked up his water glass, set it down precisely where it had been. "I wish you well. I genuinely do. This is not a performance. I am finished." He walked through the ballroom and out the door, and the room remained silent behind him for a long moment that no one standing in it would be able to accurately describe afterward. And he rode the elevator to the roof and climbed back into the aircraft and watched the city fall away below him as the helicopter lifted into the clear April dark. He was done. 9 months had passed like steady rain by the time Darius sat on the porch of a house he had purchased and renovated in the Plaza Midwood neighborhood of Charlotte. A 1940s cottage with good bones and narrow plank pine floors. He had refinished himself over a long January, working in the evenings after the crews had gone, because some work he still preferred to do with his own hands. The divorce had been finalized in July. The prenuptial agreement had held in its entirety. The asset disclosure had restructured the division proceedings in a way that Claudette's attorney had spent 3 months attempting to challenge and had ultimately accepted. She retained a portion of the joint savings, the furniture she had chosen, and a small account that Darius's attorney had described as a gesture of good faith and that Darius had described as sufficient. He had expanded the Aviation LLC in the fall, taking on 2 additional aircraft and a small charter operation that his business manager projected would return its capital within 18 months. He had also, quietly, funded the renovation of a community aviation and technical training center in the Greer Heights neighborhood of Charlotte. A project his father would have approved of so thoroughly that Darius sometimes spoke about it to him in the early mornings, the way he had spoken to him when Earl was still alive, which was to say plainly and without sentiment, and with the expectation of being heard. He had met Audra at the ribbon cutting for the training center in September. She was an aerospace engineer with the measured temperament of a person who solved problems for a living, and the particular quality of listening as though the answer were somewhere inside what you were saying, and she intended to find it. She was here now, sitting in the adjacent chair on the porch with a book open in her lap and her coffee going cold the way coffee always went cold when she was reading. And she had not asked about the helicopter story, which had circulated through Charlotte's professional networks with the speed of things that are both true and improbable. She had heard it from someone else and had, when he eventually confirmed it, simply nodded and said, "You timed it deliberately." He had said yes. She had said, "Good." Claudette Mercer-Wynne was, by November, working as a senior account director at a regional marketing firm in Raleigh, a step removed from the agency she had built in Charlotte, whose remaining partners had made a quiet decision about leadership in the months following the April event. Preston Hale's commercial real estate partnership had dissolved following the surfacing of an unrelated investor dispute that preceded his involvement with Claudette by 3 years. He had relocated to Greensboro. Her sister, who had been among the 200 people at the Hendricks estate and who had called Darius the week after to say that she was sorry, had not spoken to Claudette in 6 months. Darius heard these things through the ordinary passage of information in a city that talked. He noted them without satisfaction and without guilt and moved forward. The pine floors inside needed one more coat. The back garden was bare now, but he had drawn a plan, raised beds along the south fence, a Japanese maple in the corner where the light came through longest. In the spring he would begin. He was free. He was unbothered. He had built everything worth keeping. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.